Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1003 just came out, and it looks like the action is just not stopping, which is pretty great for us. So we pick up right where we left off from last chapter with Luffy just pummeling Kaido, and Oda did devote a lot more panels to Kaido just getting his face beat in by Luffy than I expected, because, I thought last chapter was kind of the big panel of Luffy just getting his Gatling in on Kaido, but it just continued for a full page or so in this chapter. And it does look like Oda did this because it seems as though that is going to be the last damage that Luffy's getting in on Kaido for a little bit. Maybe, the next few chapters or so. Depends on how long Oda wants to play with this Luffy time limit. 10-minute time limit before he can use Haki again, because Oda has played it a little loose in the past in terms of how long 10 minutes can take. Sometimes it can take a chapter, sometimes it can be, stretched across many chapters. So what's interesting is that we've seen multiple times in the raid of Onigashima so far that Luffy has become a lot more flexible with using Gear 4th, so I was kind of under the impression that the time limit where he could no longer use Haki for a period of time had just gone away, that restriction was gone. But it seems as though it's shifted a little bit more to, if Luffy uses Gear 4th for a brief period of time, then he's still in fighting shape, right? Because we've seen Luffy use Gear 4th a couple of times so far. We saw him use it in conjunction with, Kid and Law back at sea when they first all converged around, Kaido's fleet that was guarding Onigashima. So we saw that he was in perfectly good fighting shape immediately after using Gear 4th there. And then we also saw him use it in a combo attack with X-Drake, and then again, Luffy was not completely drained of Haki. He wasn't exhausted being needed to be carried around or anything like that like he is right now. So it seems as though there's two different situations at this point depending on how long Luffy uses Gear 4th, because Luffy did use it fairly extensively just now against Kaido. So what I would think is that compared to, for example, in Whole Cake Island, where in Whole Cake Island Luffy used Gear 4th for just one punch to get in against Big Mom and was immediately drained after that, and Sanji was needing to carry him. I think that's very different from what we're seeing now. So there is some clear progression to Luffy's usage of Gear 4th. He can use it a lot more casually without having to worry about the drawback, but it's clear that if he uses it for a full extensive fight, then he still has to deal with the repercussions. So that's good to know, clears us up on that. Beyond that, we had Kaido basically striking back. He switched over to wind attacks, which I was just thinking, Big Mom used lightning last chapter, but you use a little lightning because it seems like if you both use lightning, it's probably going to be very effective based on what we saw just a second ago. But it is cool to see Kaido exercise, the full range of his abilities. I'm actually really liking Kaido's moveset at this point. Zoro made a comment that it is like fighting a natural disaster, and that is just cool to see because that is what, at least from my understanding, that is what, in Eastern mythology what dragons kind of represent. Maybe not represent, but they are able to, summon storms, do things like that. So it is cool to see that Kaido has such a vast array of abilities and they're all so large scale, right? Before I wasn't super impressed with his wind attacks, but this time he's summoning up full, tornadoes, whatever you want to call them, and he's still able to convert them into cutting wind attacks. So it is really interesting to see Kaido have such a wide and varied moveset, because when we first saw him in dragon form, I was like, okay, this is clearly pure physical power. And then we got a bit of, his fire attacks and such that he used against the Straw Hats from a distance when they were at Odin's castle way back in Act 1. So it was like, okay, so he's a dragon, he's big and strong, and he has fire attacks. But at this point, it's starting to feel like, okay, what can't he do? Can he create waves? Like, Big Mom has some ability to manipulate waves. Can Kaido do things like that? Can he, call down rain? There's just a lot of question marks as to what the full extent of his abilities is at this point. Although it does look like, at the moment, fire, lightning, and wind are his three main go-tos. So, interesting to see if his hybrid form unlocks anything else. I'll talk about his hybrid form a little bit towards the end. Beyond that, we have Zoro's Tatsumaki attack. That is one of my favorite attacks by Zoro, going all the way back to Arlong Park. So it was cool to see it back in action here. I have always liked seeing Zoro's old school moves basically upgraded and enhanced and being busted out in the new world. So for example, the 1080-pound Phoenix, Tatsumaki, the upgraded version of that, was one of the first things we saw from Zoro back in Fishman Island. It's really cool to see it coming out here against Kaido of all people and actually getting in a significant cut on him. And that basically means that Kid is the last person out of this group of 5 to actually get some significant damage in on Kaido. So Zoro got that off his, that monkey off his back. So basically at this point, Luffy, Law, Killer, and Zoro have all gotten in their, individual attacks, cuts, punches, etc. on Kaido and dealt damage to him. So Kid still got to do that, but I'm sure something really big is planned for Kid, just around the corner. Zoro, Oda had been kind of we've had 2 chapters in a row now where it's like, okay, Zoro gonna cut Kaido, Zoro gonna cut Kaido, and now we finally got it. I think a lot of Zoro fans are probably pretty happy about that Zoro got his cut in on Kaido, and I'm sure there's much bigger attacks from Zoro to come, and he's gonna have something much more significant on Kaido down the line. I feel like something that will match what Oden did to Kaido, at least match what Oden did to Kaido, but I think, we've got to see some more growth over the course of this fight, or in the future, something like that, before Zoro does that. I will say, last chapter I talked about how I don't personally like the direction Oda is going with Enma, and how, how Enma is playing into how much of it is the sword versus how much of it is Zoro, etc. I don't personally like Enma as a power-up for Zoro, and I do feel like this chapter reinforced a lot of what I was saying that last chapter. I don't think I was totally off base with what I was saying last chapter. In this chapter, we do have quotes from Kaido saying that, it's Oden is the source of that strange haki coming from the sword. It doesn't feel as though this is all, that impressive for Zoro for me, because the implication to me is that if Zoro did not have Enma, if he had his 2 other swords, which are also really, really good high-quality swords, he just doesn't have that skill to be able to cut Kaido. It does feel like he's just picked up a sword, granted a sword that he has to be able to control, but he has picked up a just special sword with somebody else's haki in it, with certain special effects and properties that just allow him to be able to cut Kaido. Granted, again, he has to control it, but that doesn't feel like Zoro had to grow as a swordsman necessarily. He didn't have to learn a new skill, essentially. He just had to be able to handle the haki coming out of Enma, essentially. So, I understand why that's very debatable, and, to what degree that means Zoro progressed as a swordsman, but to me that just feels a little different than any other time Zoro has picked up a special sword. So again, I wonder how many more quotes we're going to keep getting like this, that it's, people hyping up Enma. This has never happened before with Zoro, where the hype is continually going towards the sword that he just picked up. He will comment on how good the sword he just picked up is, and how it's maybe giving him a new little edge in fights, but this feels very different. If you look at the quotes between last chapter and this chapter, it really does feel like the intimidation factor here is the sword, the haki coming from the sword, Oden's haki, etc., rather than Zoro the swordsman himself. So let's see how this continues, how this progresses. I'm sure that Oda has a good end direction in mind with why he gave Zoro Enma and what that means for his journey as a swordsman. So let's just wait and see. But at the moment, I'm just expressing that I don't enjoy the quotes that we've been getting around Enma these last couple chapters. So beyond that, the main, bulk of the arc, I guess, was covered by the CP0 conversation. And I did like that. It does feel like basically taking a step back from everything that's been going on, because this has been a very chaotic, action on all sides sort of situation ever since we set foot on Onigashima. So this does feel like not exactly a breather, but kind of a, detached step back look at everything that's going on the island. It's not like we got, a full map of like, this person's here, these are all the fights and everything like that are set up, but it did basically allow Oda kind of to sum up the situation, the stakes, the pressure that the Straw Hats are under, and what's being fought for here from a third-party observer, which is the CP0 group. And I do like that CP0 is around on this island, because, they report directly to the world government. I do wonder what is going to get out from here to the world government if the Marines are going to see an opportunity to come to Wano here, because CP0 is going to be reporting on this. It depends basically on the call that they decide to make. And I just enjoy that their presence in Wano is kind of this X factor that means that we don't really know what direction the plot could take at any point. Lastly, we had, Kaido turning into hybrid form. That is something that we have waited for a long, long time. Slightly disappointed that we didn't actually get to see it. I thought that Oda would end a chapter, a cliffhanger, with us finally seeing Kaido's hybrid form, but I guess he just wants to tease it and then bust it out the next chapter, kind of like Oda has done with Luffy's, Gear 2nd, Gear 4th in the past. At least with Gear 4th, I might be wrong on Gear 2nd. But definitely very excited to see Kaido's hybrid form. Judging from people's reactions, it's most likely something very intimidating, very fitting for his character. And I do hope that, Kaido gets to flex a little bit with it. before the Supernova get to start fighting back. Luffy's out for at least 10 minutes, so I imagine things might go a little downhill for the group before Luffy can kind of get back on his feet and take his swing at the hybrid form. So that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and watch out for videos next week.